stream up here and working. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our evening session. This is the Iowa Power BI user group. We had a last minute change of plans here very quickly. So James is not with us tonight. He's typically the one running these, but I got to give James credit. James did a good job organizing all the content for tonight and getting things situated. So James just couldn't be with us. He had a prior obligation. So I'm filling in for a bit just to make sure everything's going well. Welcome, Andrew. Andrew's our speaker tonight. Hello, how are you doing?
Doing good. Been quite a busy season. Things are picking up.
Yeah.
And still want to get outside into the nice weather as it heats up.
I do enjoy the warm weather. I was able to go down to Florida for spring break for a little bit, so I was able to soak up some warm weather. I'm happy to bring it back to you here in Wisconsin, so that was wonderful, and I'm enjoying being outside right now with the 60, 65 degree weather here in Wisconsin. It is thoroughly enjoyable.
Yeah, that melts everything that was left pretty fast.
Yeah, true statement. With that, we'll jump right in. Today's topic is all around Power BI and going beyond with Databricks. So, Andrew, it's all to you, man. Kick it off, and we're excited to get going on this one.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So my name's Andrew Sitz. I'll just start off by saying not going to make a really extravagant slideshow by any means. I like to keep it an open type of a dialogue and interactive as much as possible. So feel free to ask questions. We'll try to yield those as well as we can, as quick as we can. And then following the meeting, we are planning to have a Teams type of a happy hour, as has come to be our tradition. And we can share out that link later. I believe we have that already. Correct, Mike?
That is correct. We have a Teams link that we'll share out afterwards, and then people can kind of jump on a Teams call, ask more questions of Andrew, dive a little bit deeper. That's kind of how we run things. And roughly an hour of presentation, and then hanging out as just a user group and talking about more data things.
Yeah. So if you haven't met me before, my name is Andrew Sitz. I am out of the Des Moines area, and I've been working with Power BI itself since the first year that it came out. And it's evolved immensely over time, but wanted to give a talk as I am a solutions architect at a Databricks partner now that's started out being more centered around Databricks as opposed to, say, like Microsoft partner first. So it's been a really interesting experience, and there's been a lot of recent developments around Databricks' capacity to really augment Power BI. So wanted to have a discussion tonight around that topic. So historically, I don't think it's too uncommon to see if you come from a Microsoft background, there's a modern analytics architecture. I think it used to be called the advanced analytics architecture, and that has been replaced recently. But it's not uncommon to see a similar type of a suite of resources from Azure, if you come from that space, where you may have batch type ingestion using Data Factory, and then Databricks maybe more along the processing lines, not only for batch, but from streaming, whether it be coming from a service like Event Hubs or IoT Hub. And this architecture also includes some other serving elements, but I kind of wanted to talk about some changes over time that have maybe allowed for more simplification in an architecture, or at least give more options. And the dialogue isn't even just along the lines of Azure itself. So kind of want to take a 10,000 foot view to begin with, talk about what Databricks is. So it's evolved to be called a Lakehouse platform, looking to unite the best of data warehousing and the capabilities to scale with and store things efficiently of all file types with data lakes, whereas those used to be kind of disparate systems. So it is actually deployed across all major clouds. So something that's unique about it is from a serving perspective, kind of where I wanted to focus on tonight, that being the Databricks SQL interface, as there are multiple personas. And don't worry, I'm gonna have a hands-on experience here in a bit around that. But you can get the same type of experience on Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud. Um, you can also, there is also Databricks deployed, interestingly enough, on Alibaba Cloud. I know little to nothing about that deployment. It is quite a bit different experience, and I have never worked in the cloud in China myself. But kind of building upon the foundation, so Databricks evolved from around the 2012, 2013 from early Spark developments. It comes from the founders of Apache Spark themselves. So whenever new developments are made from Apache Spark, those are usually first and most optimally delivered via new runtime, new features in Databricks. So Databricks operates as Spark as a service, and they've also created other technologies such as Delta Lake, which is completely open source. It adds, I don't know if everyone is completely familiar with that format, but basically it uses Parquet files under the hood, but it creates the capability to have ACID transactions and more of a SQL type warehousing experience, I guess, from the BI developer's perspective on top of the data lake. And there is also a capability now in terms of governance that is a key component of the Databricks Lakehouse platform called Unity Catalog. And if you haven't heard of that, essentially what it is that in the past, you used to have a separate metastore per Databricks workspace. So they were, you could get a little bit siloed and have disparity and have less purview into what's going on. That's not a Microsoft pun intended, but it was a little bit more difficult to see the complete topography of a Databricks deployment. Say if you had workspaces aligned with SDLC, maybe you even had another workspace for machine learning with access to production data for training, as that's a little bit different process. But the Unity catalog enables for cross workspace metadata management and governance, and it is actually marching towards the thought pattern of having the same experience from a governance perspective, even across clouds. Within the platform itself, I think many are familiar with the fact that Databricks started out as more of a data science and machine learning type product that was very notebook centric. It offered streaming capabilities with Spark structured streaming quite early on. Data engineering workloads came into the picture via jobs, which have gotten quite a bit significant improvements in the last year to two. And then most recently, just due to a similar type of market environment with competition and rapid innovation, it has drastically evolved and improved in the data warehousing experience that it offers. That data warehousing persona is what I had intended to orient this conversation around tonight. So, because there's such a breadth of topics that could be gone over around this entire platform, trying to give it a little bit of focus and keep the conversation within a reasonable length so that we could, go about our busy weeks and have our happy hour after the presentation here. So I guess a little bit of a background of the necessity for this type of a product suite. I would say, although Databricks goes by the name Lakehouse, it's attacking the same problem sets that vendors use for uh, the issues faced at scale in the cloud, wanting to unite structured, semi-structured, completely unstructured data, and not have an entire gap between what, say, a data science team is doing and what uh, business intelligence is doing. Whereas those used to be extremely difficult, say, to scale, particularly in the data science and machine learning space. The Lakehouse addresses that scale and also the what we know and love around data warehousing and BI. In terms of the more of the business intelligence persona, these are visuals that come straight from Databricks documentation. They're public facing. So it's constituted by underlying cloud storage, whether that be AWS S3, Azure Data Lake Gen 2, you name it. Having Delta Lake capabilities or ACID transactions on top of that, having governance, as I mentioned, layering in. But around this experience comes more of a mantra of reducing the knobs or the buttons, the complexity around managing a open source platform such as Spark, and making that extremely easy to run and work with. And that is most recently highlighted in Databricks' serverless capabilities. I'm sure that some that will view this have familiarity with the serverless experience in Synapse Analytics. So hopefully you'll get something out of this. I wasn't intending to cover a huge amount around Photon, which is basically a rewrite of a processing engine for Spark, optimized for all of its APIs, written in C++. But I'm essentially there is a capability to make Spark run quite a bit more efficiently with the new processing engine, and that is actually shown in the diagnostics that you see when you use the Databricks SQL experience. So some of the things I wanted to walk through the interface about SQL warehouses themselves. They've gone by multiple names, had name changes. They're called SQL warehouses on the SQL side of Databricks, and there is a built-in SQL editor and other capabilities that I wanted to take a look at here. So I'll go ahead and get that onto the screen within a Databricks tab here, and I'm going to just readjust my share really quick.
No worries there. I got your screen coming up. Yep, I see it now. Pushing out the screen, and we can now see a Databricks environment with the navigation on the left-hand side there.
Yeah, so traditionally when you logged into Databricks, the data science and engineering experience, or navigation would be the first to open, but you can actually choose which you like to see by default. And I've got the SQL experience open here.
And can I pause you just for a second? Is there any chance you can zoom in maybe just a couple ticks here on this one by chance?
Absolutely.
Oh, perfect. That's really good right there. Yeah. And then maybe go show that little menu that you were popping out there at the upper left-hand corner, because it's a little bit small to begin with.
Yeah. So in this experience, it's got a lot of the different breakouts of capabilities available. I guess to begin with, where to explain the compute on the SQL side, there are a few different options. So if you actually go to create a SQL warehouse, there's a classic option, pro, and serverless. The biggest thing is that if you're familiar with the Databricks architecture, there is a concept called the data plane, where the compute resources are within your subscription. And within the Pro and Classic SKUs, though that is the case. However, with serverless, the data plane is actually on a managed Databricks environment. So the compute is served on demand, and you don't have to worry about hitting anything such as quotas, and it scales up a little bit differently than even a traditional interactive cluster. So talking about that, so the sizing has been simplified. T-shirt sizing, it tells you the consumption rate, which is essentially per minute, is a breakdown for your usage. You can have in the UI, you can set up as little as 10 minutes for an auto stop or terminate time. You can actually go faster than that because a lot of these capabilities are backed by APIs. So you can actually ping and wake up a serverless compute, which on average takes between 5 to 10 seconds at this point. The I would say that the Databricks team is focused on making that as quick and easy experience as possible. So there's going to be some upcoming improvements to that type of a startup time in the future. As far as scaling itself, you can specify that pretty easily up front. So serverless compute in Databricks, like a traditional cluster, scales horizontally, and it distributes across a number of worker nodes. Databricks SQL actually scales in that regard on which compute SKU that you select, determines how much essentially machinery that you have, but you can also specify how many clusters there are. So you can have it scale up using its determination algorithm. It will auto scale for you to suit needs. It's actually capable to support up to 400 concurrent users at the largest scale. I haven't observed that myself. I've observed around a couple hundred concurrent users at a time. But I think for most individuals, this could even take the play. And in terms of Power BI, it might even take the face of using this capability, going with serverless to even initiate a refresh that's an import mode in a model, so that you're only paying for exactly what you use. So there are some additional options. Tying to Unity Catalog, I would recommend not always enabling Unity Catalog if you get a Databricks workspace up and running. There are tagging options. So from a top level administrative side, it's possible to call out the tagging if you want to track the individual cost of like a serverless warehouse. And unless you want to do some things with experimental features, I would keep on the channel being current.
Quickly before you move on from the Unity catalog, what does the Unity catalog toggle give you that helps you out here longer term? So you recommend leaving it on. Does it provide additional data assets or information about what's occurring there? What is that doing behind the scenes there?
Yeah, so if you use Unity Catalog, you don't just, you actually enable a three-part namespace for your objects. So there's catalog, schema, or some call it database, and then the object name, like a table or view.
Mhm.
On Unity Catalog, if you enable it, it actually allows you to see lineage, see a lot more information around data that, let's see, if we go to the data tab, here is a catalog itself. I'll go to one of these tables itself. So there are a lot of there's a lot of information, such as if you were to run a describe with Spark SQL or PySpark, so you can get information about all the types that are in the table. You can actually have a front end interface to interact with those options. Like if you want to add comments instead of running a SQL command that says like alter table, add comment, you can do that right here. You can get a sample of data. This is running on this endpoint actually just started up, by the way, when I came in here. This is a different endpoint, serverless compute. So it took maybe around just a few seconds to get up
That's
and
cool.
running.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need, so in the past, you didn't see any of these objects within a metastore until your cluster was up and running, which is kind of a pain.
Yeah.
But now with Unity Catalog, you can see a lot of that information up front right away when you log in.
Interesting. Okay, that's good to know.
So there is a lot of information. Like if you were to go into describe extended, running that within your language of choice, you can see permissions. You can see changes. So within
Nice.
Delta itself, Delta does not do hard deletes. So when it does like a delete and insert, it actually just controls versions within JSON behind the scenes, and manages metadata until you run a command called vacuum that gets rid of old files, additional files that are beyond the policy that you set. The default is 30 days for a table. You can make that, you can adjust that. I would just make a note around that. You can use it to do things like restore, track changes, and so forth. But if you want to actually materialize the changes and ensure that you have complete control, you can use the merge capabilities of Delta to make like a slowly changing dimension, so that you're in complete control of that.
Nice. Cool. I didn't know how much the Unity catalog added to all these other enhancements. I didn't know that turning that flag on does all this extra stuff for you in the SQL engine. That's good.
Yeah, there's actually lineage that's in here. I am not sure if I take a look at something that's further upstream, it'll tell me exactly where it came from, and then it'll show
Oh, cool.
a DAG of where it came from, where it's actually referenced throughout
wow.
all of Databricks.
Nice. Cool.
And then there are also some new insights that this is a preview feature. I believe it's a preview feature. It will tell you about like what the top types of queries are that are run up against the object.
Oh, that's really interesting. So if this is a view or a table and you're running Power BI against this, it would likely show you which data refreshes are trying to hit this table, and it would give you some kind of metrics around, hey, this table is being used repeatedly by these people.
Yeah, and to that
interesting.
To that regard,
that's cool.
There are even the capabilities around, if you're talking, like, not to jump ahead of myself, but I like taking the conversation naturally with this. So if you're looking to use the capability, the auto aggregations from Power BI,
Mm-hmm.
Databricks is supported as a vendor with that functionality.
Mm-hmm.
So as opposed to having to manually um, do something like add partitioning or add Z ordering, which Z ordering is kind of like a clustered index, which co-locates records. So it makes it really quick to scan high cardinality columns, whereas partitioning is more so for a bigger chunk of data, ideally closer to around a terabyte that
Mm-hmm.
is low cardinality. Um, the thing about that, though, is that serverless is turning into more of a self-driving engine.
Mm.
So it has a capability called the Intelligent Workload Manager, and it starts to learn and predict how what your consumption looks like when you use tables. So even from personal experience, I've seen like hundreds of queries going, say, from a tool like DBT hitting the SQL endpoint at the same time, and it it actually is learning about how you're using compute and also learning about how you use your objects like tables, so that it is kind of getting to the point where you don't have to worry as much about individual performance tuning of objects, and you can start to focus more so on the just analytic aspect, getting value
Wow. That's
from data.
huge. That's
It,
huge.
yeah, it really is.
Cool.
I have in a little bit, I have a 15 billion row data set we'll play around
Nice.
with direct query.
Excellent.
Uh, and but yeah, the Unity catalog enables quite a bit of functionality, and you can have either managed tables within Databricks or unmanaged. That meaning that, so for the managed tables, that's kind of like that mantra of a self-driving vehicle. Databricks is in its newest runtimes, 12. It's over 12 and above. I believe it might be 12.1 or 12, a different version, but the newer runtimes are actually um, let me think about what I kind of lost my train of thought on that. Maybe it'll come back to me.
I think you were kind of talking about the optimization and the self-optimizing of the
Oh,
newer runtime engines is kind of where you're
yeah,
going.
yeah. The newer runtimes will actually do automatic optimization of files if you have managed tables. So they will keep Databricks files in the underlying storage in the ideal size
Mm-hmm.
for you. So if you were to go run optimize on a managed table with a newer runtime, it's not going to do anything
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's already been taken care of. It actually uses a feature under the hood called auto optimize. That is the actual feature. There's you can specify that blatantly for read and write. They have a little bit different um,
Cool.
sizing.
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you on your presentation, but I didn't know how deeply Unity Catalog integrated, and I'm very pleased to see that it gives you like lineage and insights, and then tracks all the queries run against it. I mean, these are the kind of things that we've been wanting for Power BI data models, which we don't get because there's no tracking of any of that stuff without a lot of extra effort. And the fact that this is coming so effortlessly is surprising to me. I'm shocked.
Yeah, and they're along those lines. So Databricks is really on a mission to make Spark easier to use.
Yeah.
So if you've used like structured streaming before, uh, it's got a lot of knobs. So there are capabilities now, say with Delta Live tables, where it makes it just a simple declarative approach where you say select star from this live table if you use SQL, or you can use Python. And it takes care of the complexity of using streaming data for you. Adding to that piece, there is a new materialization that is in preview with Delta Live tables called a materialized view. So it actually is going to hold data. So you will be able to read from that as an object type for batch and streaming type scenarios alike. So that's there is actually a PR if you are a DBT user. There's a PR for DBT to immediately get that implemented as soon as that feature comes out.
Nice.
On their public-facing repo. So, taking a look at the built-in SQL editor in the Databricks SQL workspace. So you'll see here Unity Catalog. I'll just back up and say it's not meant to delete legacy Hive Metastore. So if you already have that, it is actually supposed to be additive to that. So how Databricks is opted to solve for that is you'll see a catalog called Hive Metastore, and then your legacy schema that you would have specified, and then the table or view name afterwards, and everything will be contained within that. There is a default schema under Hive Metastore, so you can that's where tables that are not moved to Unity Catalog would show up as. That's where they would show up. But within the cloud editor itself is actually quite nice. You can insert the table name and columns with clicks. There isn't a feature per se to programmatically like select everything as a single string, but still it's pretty nice out of the box, and it does have auto complete when you run queries. So like if we're to run a query against this warehouse, this is not on right now. So let's see, Hive Metastore, it just auto completed and I hit enter, and then DBT Sitz is my schema I've been using, and then if we say ag combined sales. So what this table actually is it's a collection where I unified 3 tables from the TPC-DS data sets. I have a 3 terabyte copy of that available to me, and I unioned correlating columns from catalog sales, web sales, and store sales. So if we were to just go query against this live, it'll start the catalog, or it'll start the serverless warehouse right off the bat. I did see a question about Databricks being a database. It does have database capabilities, and something that's I would say is different about it versus like Synapse Serverless is that if you use Unity Catalog, it completely locks down the data behind the scenes, whereas that has been a struggle traditionally, that absolutely nothing else should have access to the data in its underlying storage, whether it's managed or unmanaged. So everything is completely governed by traditional grant or grant usage, grant select, those types of commands. So just this is an aggregate that I did over some base data, and it has quite a few records, 41 million, but it took a bit to run the first time, but there is query caching. So if I rerun that, it took just a fraction of a second.
Yeah. And that first one you ran was 14 seconds to start up a cluster, execute the query, and return results. And now it's doing it in 397 milliseconds at this point.
Yeah. So now that it's up, and it does take a few seconds for the cluster to get warmed up. Like there's the concept of a warm up. I would say that's something that serverless on Synapse does extremely well, is being
pretty warm,
very much ready to go.
Yeah.
However, I've seen some benchmarking and have experienced it where I do think that, especially if you're not doing much to the data before using it, and even at tremendous scale, you'll see really, really good performance out of the serverless experience on Databricks.
Nice.
So if I just like went to go pull some records from this table, and we could even go institute some sort of an aggregate on here, or
Mhm.
just a distinct, like just seeing the sources, the limit on the back of that query is not going to do anything, but that I don't have any partitioning in place on the table to return something with that type of performance. And if you don't, um, let me go back there in case you don't believe me.
Oh, I believe you. It's going I mean, that's incredible. It's able to do a distinct across that whole thing in 1.2
Oh,
seconds.
and this is a small skew too. There is
Nice.
kind of the recommended sizing
Hmm.
for BI type workloads is to start with a medium, but maybe some larger ETL processes you'd want to get into maybe a large or an extra large.
Do
But
you
that
recommend to kind of always start with a small and work your way up? Because I mean, Microsoft or Databricks may recommend a medium, but in your experience, would you always start small, see how it goes, and then work your way up to the next one?
you do actually get some better technology starting from the medium skew upward.
Okay.
Behind the scenes is a more basic answer. So
Gotcha.
I'm a fan of the medium upward myself, but I think if you're starting just testing it out, I'd say there is an extra small skew, but I would say probably a small is totally fine as well.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool.
And as far as the um, here, describe extended, show partitions.
I just love the SQL commands like this. This just makes so much sense to me.
And it threw an exception because it's not partitioned. So it's just a learning from my usage
Yeah.
since I built this table within the last couple of days.
Gotcha.
So it does get better even over time with something that might take a long time the first time. So kind of exploring the workspace here. M code warms my heart. Not meant to cannibalize that. So there is artifact discovery within the SQL experience as well. So you can find notebooks, dashboards, and something that I'll just point out with that is that, and let me see if I have that. I think I have that on another tab right now. Let me exit the full screen. Something that's a differentiator on the Pro warehouse, which is on your data plane. So it's up to you to make sure that the compute resources align to your thresholds in your cloud subscription. But within serverless and the Pro SKU, you can actually, if you go to create a Databricks workflow, you can call SQL queries out. This is a preview feature right now. You can actually call these out directly within a job. So you could easily have an option for someone who wants to stay SQL centric to go create and manage their own types of pipelines without getting, I mean, if you want to get into more CI/CD, get into more processes, totally fine. This you can back your jobs in source control, so there's no issue there. You can actually add steps after the fact. Say if you wanted to run like a Python script, or you wanted to swap back and forth between languages, If you're just looking to consume an end result, that would be a benefit of just the unification of these personas in a single platform, where it's not like a disparate relationship. The machine learning capabilities in Databricks come pre-installed with a lot of the most popular packages available, like TensorFlow or MLflow, which the founders of Spark created. So wanted to cover that, and you can call out the serverless compute. So this tasks themselves you would only get charged for exactly what you use.
I like that.
When you start to translate that into making sense for a smaller to medium-sized organization,
Mhm.
I mean, compare that to what does it cost to upgrade a SKU in another service, or
Yep.
compare that to paying the salary of somebody
Who manages the thing of the it's a hidden cost that I don't think many companies seem to absorb. They just assume that they're going to need to have a SQL database, and they're like, oh shoot, we need someone to manage it, and then you've instantly acquired a salary that goes along with that management of SQL instances. This is something you don't have to manage as much.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
you can take it if you want to play with knobs, you can definitely do that, but it's built to with ease of use kind of as um, the first thought.
Dig it.
So something in terms of a coming from a Power BI perspective, if you've been around for a while and you know about data-driven subscriptions, which are not implemented aside from the on-premise Power BI report server, look no further, because you can actually implement alerts that run on a schedule on data with Databricks, and they can send out messages. So I don't know if I have a sample in here, but
This is
essentially,
interesting. So once you meet a certain threshold or something, you can kick out data results.
yeah. So you could it will give you the columns. You have a lot of different options.
Interesting.
Of and you could formulate the query so that it would easily be encompassed within these options. Like, say if you just tried to you wanted to make sure there wasn't a single record in a result set that made a certain criteria, otherwise you need a message fired off.
Yeah.
That's an extremely easy way to get up and running with this capability.
Interesting.
And then you can have it run there. So there's a preview on the jobs themselves on Databricks workflows where they're going to actually have a cadence to run continuously. But this is highly flexible with the out-of-the-box options. You can trigger it completely with the APIs available. So you could do it on demand. This could be the final step or it could be part of the testing component of a pipeline. Say if tests failed and you wanted to couple this with sending out failure notifications, it's quite possible. So the alerts, I would say, have a capability to enhance on the Power BI side. I know you could always make the argument that Power BI may have, filter context, or it may be an output of bringing data together that's not possible. You could technically implement Roach's maxim and do that, say in Databricks with serverless, like we're talking about, and then so that alerting capability, maybe you focus the Power BI efforts on more semantic layer as opposed to notifications. Along that line, it does have dashboarding capabilities. I think if you're looking from a Power BI perspective, you might think about this just for monitoring backend telemetry. There are some new logs that will be coming out where you can see usage on even with serverless, say who's running which types of queries. So you could even get to the point of assimilating cost to particular tables that a team owns on top of the cost, where you could break out by your business unit as needed when you tag serverless warehouses. Say if you had a finance team, a marketing team, or even just you wanted to use one for development, one for production. A lot of options there. So these can actually be sent out. So it can, there's two types of reporting called out by Gartner in its research. And type 2 reporting is like bursted reporting, more along the lines of paginated. So this could just be something that comes along the side of that, not looking to. I know that Databricks bought an Israeli visualization company in the last couple of years. Their visualizations have gotten to be quite a bit better, but I don't see this as something that is trying to completely take the place of another BI tool downstream. And the reason I would say that is, like, if you go to use a particular warehouse itself, if you go to like the connection details, you can click on all of these different types of tools or extensions to, like, this is really similar to Azure SQL data warehouses, where it'll create a file that has the connections, and if you specify a personal access token, you can get that up and running right away. Something else I'll note about the Power BI connector, I can show that later on, but it actually, they did enable native SQL queries, and native SQL queries in the Power BI connector for Databricks actually have complete push down support, so they fold. Although I don't think it's the best practice to put that native SQL inside of a connection. It might be something to do if you're just putting a mock-up or something together, but not really production grade. Within the queries themselves, you can actually give, or the editor, you can call out particular queries to make dashboards and alerts, or you can, if you have them saved by a certain name, you can call them out in a workflow. So there isn't any capability at this point, though, to say call a named query that could be a whole bunch of queries back to back in Power BI through the connector. I did see a comment about query folding. So there is a property if you set up a connection with the Databricks connector, and it does say enable folding equals true by default. Not sure why you would want to turn that off, to be honest.
Makes total sense to send the query right back up to the engine.
Yeah. So, and then all of these things that I'm showing on the side are basically APIs. So there is a query history API, but you can go in like to queries that have run. Let me go to one that actually did something. So it'll show the code that was run, and you can go into the complete query plan. You can see that almost all of this was used with Photon. This might have been one of the, I don't think this was the startup query itself, but it'll give you a whole bunch of information that can tell you about performance. You can go into profiling, get a ton of information from there. You can basically keep it as much of a self-driving engine as you want. So the cost info, I saw that. The cost information is not on the query history. There are some other logs that are not quite to public preview yet that will show the consumption per query, and those are going to be available in the near future. Databricks talked to a whole bunch of companies about their needs and found the top companies. Yeah, I did see that Redash. That's the visualization company. It looks like Mike found that. But yeah, this information and who uses it, what they're doing, and then the cost elements of those are the first types of things that'll be available in the new logging. That wasn't available off the bat with serverless because the data plane is not in your cloud subscription, so that you'll be able to unify that with the logging that does exist for clusters on your data plane. Like traditional interactive clusters, you can already get a ton of information out of, but it'll provide unification to that, so it'll be a nice bridge. So I feel like I've done enough talking about on Databricks, so wanted to move over, show you some of these tables that in Power BI that I put together. So I did bring in some dimensions, just made a really simple star schema. The dimensions are all in dual storage. There is one that's a pretty sizable dimension on customer. That's like 30 million rows. And that only ties into this largest transaction table. Then I did make some aggregations. You see a couple of them, and I'll show you a difference between those in a little bit. But if we're using Databricks, even from a composite model standpoint, I wanted to call out and say, I would consider it to be one of the coolest features released in a long time in Power BI, to have the apply all or clear all buttons in Power BI desktop. I would just say I'm a huge fan to begin with of composite models because it is quite a unique offering within BI tools. A lot of tools, even Tableau, doesn't allow you to have that type of an offering. You have to have 100% live connection, which is like a direct query, or you have to have the data imported. So let's take a look at, so I have just like a really basic count on this large transaction table. Similar to what we did before, it should, and I'm not sure if we might be using a different serverless endpoint to begin with, but this is counting without hitting any sort of an aggregation. So it might take a little bit to get up and running. Let's see. But I like to do these live to give a realistic point of view. I mean, granted, I have
also to confirm what's going on here. So you have some calculations you've built. These are measures that you've created on top of tables that are direct querying back to the SQL endpoint?
Yeah, the transaction tables are all direct querying. There are a couple aggregations, so it'll attempt to do rewrites for fields specified.
Gotcha.
So it's showing that there's 12 billion rows here. That could just have to do with the count function itself. But if we look at something like that will do a rewrite, just like a sum of sales, it should be pretty performant. That's wide open on this table. I think it has 101 million records.
Nice, pretty quick.
So if you were to go use one of the dimensions alongside it, I do have. So the difference between those two tables is that I did it implement partitioning in a Z order at the highest level aggregate. So it's completely upstream, but there's partitioning on this date column. And then there's also a Z order on the store itself. So that's going to tie into something else I'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, say if you were to just go randomly just put, I'm wondering why I just have the single store specified. That's why. So if we, that's a full scan of the table without, and this has no partitioning
There we
aligned
go.
to the
Nice.
manager. But if we were to go just make like a random slicer selection, these are all fake names. Hopefully nobody has this name in the meeting. But just going and making some random selection, it didn't find any data for those points. Something that could be considered maybe a little bit of a lunacy, but you could do it here, is apply a filter based on the presence of sales for those individuals. So it's kind of reverse filtered. And if we were to go apply that now, we should see some figures.
Oh, nice.
So that's pretty stinking good performance considering it's I've literally done next to nothing to these tables, and I'm just using aggregate rewrites that are just doing a direct query on a smaller table.
Can I pick on you here a bit? Because I want to, knowing that we have Power BI going here, do you mind opening up Performance Analyzer and hitting a little refresh on this? Because I'd be curious to see what the timings. So this is one that I use when I look at like, okay, how fast are things really going here on your view ribbon? Oh yeah, there you go. You found it. Optimize. Yep. Yeah. Let's hit it and run it again and see what it does.
Mm-hmm. And it
oh, right there to the right of your cursor, refresh visuals. There you go. And then it should tell you how long it takes. Look at that. All right. Yeah. Okay. Look at that. Okay, so 166. So I think the sales table, the sales button there is what you're looking for. And that'll then open that one up as it'll get all your query timings.
This slicer is pre-filtering to managers that actually have sales.
Yeah. You're also putting some work in right there too.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's nice. It's the table to resolve the sales number is faster than the table to resolve the slicer, which is funny.
And I think I did put some partitioning on the date on one of the columns. So if we were to do that as well, just to, I haven't, like, feel free to call something out in particular if you.
Oh, there it goes. Oh, wow. That's pretty stinking fast.
And so, yeah, it didn't find a presence maybe of records for
those combination of people for those days. Yeah.
Yeah. If I were to say clear everyone there and then just go with Saturday.
There it is. Yeah.
And so it makes your semantic layer pretty lightweight and adaptable. I think that is a great concept to look towards, not having the traditional like analysis services copies of every predicted use case of a data set. Granted, I do think the AI capability to auto manage materializations of data with Power BI is awesome. At the same time, what's the balance between its coverage level and the actual capacity that you have at hand versus you delivering more of a breadth of content? Hey, James is in here. Should we just get James on camera now?
James, jump in the jump in the stream. I'll get you in here.
So something else that is possible as well. I'm gonna go pop into Power Query really quick. So I have I have made a view. So in Databricks SQL, you can actually use a function called isMember. And what if I open that up in the browser just for a second for the sake of conversation? If I go, so something that might seem kind of crazy at first, but if you are looking to get to move even row level security upstream, it's possible. I haven't seen too many talk about this capability, but in terms of comparing it to Power BI, I'm sure everyone absolutely loves the syntax that you have to write to make a row level security a role in Power BI desktop.
Mm-hmm.
So something that you can have as an additive, jokes aside, is you can use an isMember function. I don't have access to this particular group myself. That's a battle I have to go fight in my organization. But
Okay. Yeah.
but you can test within the columns that you select, and you can do things such as redaction. This is actually using regex to replace all the I guess I don't have 100% alphanumeric characters. If I added in like 0 to 9, then
Mm-hmm.
I would, but it's converting my personal email in Power Query in a direct query to just be obfuscated. You could do this with sensitive columns themselves, and then think about coupling that with Unity Catalog and its lineage capabilities. Um, I guess the icing on the top of that at a higher level is that Purview ties in directly to Databricks, say on the Azure stack. Uh, so you can really start to get great insight into like how the sausage is made in your pipelines, whereas it might not have been as readily available before. On top of that, I have, even in the predicate of this table, you can control the actual records that are returned based off of group permissions. So this is only giving me access to seed 2 stores within this data set. So if we go to that, this is a direct query. You can see, just refresh the connection here. I can only see the two stores themselves dynamically, and then the user itself is redacted. If I went to go change this to something that I actually have access to, I just like doing it live. What is R that it's talking about? Let's see. So it'll actually tell me in here, it'll highlight. Oh, it's because maybe I slipped up and hit a space at some point just in that regex specification. So that got created. You can actually see in the diagnostics of the query, you can see some results about what types of, at least you could before, you used to be able to at least dive deeper, and you could see which things about the group that was tested, but that might have been removed. So I changed that.
Also, a question here around that as well. Could you use in this permissioning? So you're using like a single user email address at this point. Could you use Active Directory groups that would also allow you to provide permissioning that way as well? Or is it only going to be like on the user email address basis? Because that's how Power BI connects to the data source.
So you can tie in access to Databricks itself as a platform to Active Directory or to skim permissions on AWS. You can tie it into the permission modeling on GCP as well.
Gotcha.
However, the groups themselves can't be Active Directory groups. And you might think that that is a negative, but if you consider the fact that you might be traversing even clouds, it makes a lot of sense with Unity Catalog. So,
Makes sense.
but I was going to pop in here and see, I was just going to double check if I have access to this admin admin settings. If I go to the groups that are available, you have to have a certain level of permissions. So if I specify that, it is case sensitive. I was just going to run this query again. It should be back here. I was going to run it with a group that I actually had access to show you. And then I'll change both of them at the same time. Something that I would note about this, like kind of the discussion about maybe using row level security upstream, is that there isn't like a way to see. So you can see I removed that barrier, so it's not filtering the table, and then I just put this result like you have access to just demonstrate.
Nice.
So there could be some really interesting elements around like protecting sensitive data. Databricks SQL allows for Python UDFs or user-defined functions. So you could get pretty programmatic with this.
Cool.
It can actually go obfuscate data. So Databricks SQL doesn't just work with tabular data. You could go run a function that you write in Python to redact things within a nested JSON column, as an example.
Nice.
So it's not really bound just to the data being in a particular state. And there are some even other third-party. There's at least one third-party extension that ties in that tries to auto-detect sensitive data and mark that. You can also get capabilities of that nature with Purview. You can mark sensitivity on artifacts throughout Azure if you're on there. So, yeah, I wanted to point that out as a potential use case. I'm not sure if there are a whole lot of other demos that I wanted to cover per se. So if you were to go use the connector itself, I know we talked about that earlier. So if you look at, I used a variable in here, but there is a property that typically shows up that talks about query push
folding
down or
Yeah.
query folding.
Yeah.
And it's true by default. So I don't know if you made that, James, but basically you can write native SQL queries with this connector with Databricks, but in every direct query or every native query will fold down to the source. Although it's not like the greatest practice in the world, you could just make those objects upstream, and then either if you want to navigate to them, as I've done in here, or just that'd probably be the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
We had a question from Donald Parrish and asking, assume we could use Active Directory groups for permissions?
Yeah, you can use Active Directory on Azure Databricks for permissions into Databricks itself. But in terms of there are other groups in Databricks that have to do with Unity Catalog type permissions or table, view, schema, catalog type permissions that are separate from that. So they can't be 100% used with like cloud, the cloud native permission model.
Cool. That's it for all the questions. Any other demo pieces you want to kind of run through or kind of take us through? If not that, then we are about 10 minutes over on the end of the meeting, and we are able to jump into the happy hour side of things.
Yeah, I just say, like, kind of closing up, Since there's been a unification of data engineering and machine learning in Databricks, and now in the advent of its specifically its serverless and data and SQL capabilities in BI, being that a serverless warehouse can even handle up to 400 concurrent users, you could find a use case to couple it with your Power BI delivery. So whether you want to use import or direct query storage, I wanted to demonstrate that you can get pretty good performance just out of the box without turning on a bunch of properties, anything like that. You can use it as a self-driving machine and help focus more on delivering value with data. So yeah, thanks for tuning into the discussion. We do, like we mentioned, we do have a happy hour. I'm going to be there myself, happy to talk about topics on people's minds, answer any other questions, any of that.
Not just about Databricks too, so it could be basically anything.
We like just
sure.
talking data stuff, and usually Andrew and I get into some kind of heated debate about, it's open source, not open source. Why use Snowflake? Why don't use Snowflake? So, it eventually turns into a derivation of, all right, let's get into the desktop. Let's go hack something together to make sure that it works right. So, very great presentation, Andrew. Thank you very much for your time going through it at a detailed level of what Databricks is doing, and then how that connects into Power BI, and seeing those queries come across both systems. And again, I haven't spent a ton of time in Databricks SQL serverless, but based on what you demoed today, I think I need to take another look at it again. It's looking pretty strong, and it's feeling like a pretty solid competitor to the Synapse world of the things. So really looking forward to it.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
All right, with that, everyone, thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and end the stream here. The link is already in the post for YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook, and I've also posted the link over in LinkedIn as well. So if you can find those links, go ahead and hit those. And that should, assuming barring all things are going well here, that should kick us into our Teams meeting here just momentarily. So everyone, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks for the presentation. James, welcome. And hello and goodbye. Thank you all very much. We'll see you